not automatically refer to the Middle East or to any other part of the world. In the United States, they have their own terrorist group, so whose violence is directed at the government and organization they oppose on ideological grounds. Nowadays, we can see the terrorism happen in most countries, especially in worldwide. So our report will focus the terrorism happen in Palestine. The ongoing conflict in Palestine between Arabs and Israelis has played on ever since after all this time. If calculated from the official date of the establishment of the State of Israel on 15 May 1948, we will find that the conflict has been going on for over 60 years. Well, if viewed from the aspect of modern Palestinian history, it is already damaged British hands since 1970.
The conflict happened between Israel and Palestine. The Gaza Strip is now separated from the West Bank, far away from the Palestine, yet closer to Israel's side. For a long period, Egypt controlled the Gaza Strip, so Palestine into the historic native land of Jews, and Jerusalem turned into India non-secular importance. In 1936, Arabs of Palestine revolted toward the British mandate. The British suppressed them with the assets of Jewish militias. This turned into now no longer welcome with the aid of using Jewish militias, and that they become toward the British mandate. In 2005, however, Israel's Prime Minister Ariel Sharon reversed the situation when he withdrew from Gaza and the Strip was recaptured.
There are many conflicts had happened between Palestinian, Arab and Israel. The first conflict that happened with Israel and Palestinian Arab is the Israel-Palestinian battle in May 2001, also known as the 11-day war in Arabic. This began with a struggle between Palestinian demonstrators and Israel police after an Israel Supreme Court decision to expel Palestinians. The second conflict that has been happened between Israel and Palestinians is during April-May Ramadan event. This conflict occurred on the first day of Ramadan. Israel police raid Al-Haram Al-Sharif and regularly of the appreciation of Moscow worshippers. Israel police cut off the loudspeaker cable used to broadcast the call to prayer by Al-Aqsa Bilal for prayer, so that a President Reuven speech was delivered under Al-Aqsa, so that a memorial day in Israel will not disturb it. The conflict continued after military organization fired 36 rockets into southern Israel, and the IDF launched missiles over Hamas site in the Gaza Strip. Following that, a Palestinian child and 90-year-old Israeli settler were killed, and Israel police shot and killed 60-year-old Said Odeth during a raid in Nablus, as well as a balloon attack launched from Gaza that resulted in a 6 fires. This is because Itamar Ben-Gvir claimed that the house belonged to Jews and ordered the police to shoot the protesters. The last conflict that occurred was a collision when Palestinians and Israel clashed for the first time and were disputed by the involvement of Israel police, which resulted in the detention of at least 7 people. More violence erupted on May 8th, the night of the regulation Laylatul Qadr. Palestinian Arab, while were having Hamas attacks, Palestinians throwing stones, burning and shouting attack on Tel Aviv and Jews. Remember Kaiba, Muhammad army is back.
The place that conflict happened between Palestine and Israel. The remaining Palestine estimated to number around 3 million live in diaspora outside of the territory they claim as their homeland. Jordan is the only Arab country to allow Palestine leaving their citizenship. Palestinian Arab claim to the land are based on hundreds of years of interrupted residence in the country and the fact that they were the demographic majority. Nowadays in Palestine had approximately 3 million Palestinians presently live in this area, which is divided between Israel and the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which Israel invaded and occupied in 1967 for their own imperialist objective. Western nation led by United States and the United Kingdom partitioned historic Palestine in 1947 to create Israel, giving Israel 55% of the land area of Palestine.
The first cause of the conflict between Israel and Palestine is because it is clearly an illegal act of the Zionist faction seizing Muslim land for decades. Since 1948, Jews who come from Europe to Palestine began to drive out the original Palestinian Arab population little by little, until much of the area is now under Israeli control and almost entire Palestinian state has been brutally seized by the Zionists. Second reason is that the Zionist movement emerges as an ideology to establish a state for the Jews scattered in Europe. The third reason is that the Palestinian mandate was created by the British, and Jews from Europe were allowed to migrate to Palestine to establish settlement. The original purpose of the British was to give Jews a chance to settle in Palestine along Palestinian Arab rather than build a state and cause tension that often erupted between Palestinian Arab and Jews. Britain finally gave up when the situation got out of the hand and handed the matter over the United Nations. In 1970, in the Balfour Declaration, Britain then signed the Balfour Agreement with the Rothschild family, the main sponsor of the Zionist movement. Last is that at a resolution 181 of the UN General Assembly, November 1974, the UN began intervening through a resolution made by the UN. Palestinian control was divided into two parts, namely 57% of the Palestinian Arab area and 43% for Jews, with Jerusalem as the corpus spiritum, which is mean separate entity.
Partition plan and declare independence as the State of Israel.
The first recommendation and suggestions to end this conflict between Palestinian and Israelis is to promote relations with Islamic countries. There are more than 20 Muslim countries that can help the Palestinians by providing support in terms of humanitarian aid, boycotting the products of Israel and its allies, social media campaigns by disseminating the latest information on things that happen in the Palestinian state and more. With the establishment of these relations between these Islamic countries and the Palestinians can help them to continue to fight and to save their country without being attacked from the Israel. Second recommendation is by arbitration. Palestine and Israel should appoint a third party such as United Nations or any other country to make the final decision. China is one of the countries that is in favor of both sides to restarting peace talks. China supports the just struggle of the Palestinian people to restore their legitimate national rights, support a solution to the current crisis through political dialogue, and support the UN, the League of Arab States, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in their constructive roles in this regard. Third recommendation and suggestions to end this conflict is by one-state solution. One-state solution is a proposal of a secular, democratic Israeli-Palestinian state that includes all of Israel and Palestinian territory, with equal rights and responsibilities for Muslims, Christians, Jews, and other inhabitants. A one-state solution suggests that pre-1967 Israel, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank to become a single country. It is very sad when children and teenagers are forced to see death, weapons the size of themselves, and it is hard to imagine that they will die just like that as a result of the terrorism going on between these two sides. No human being should be forced to live in inhuman conditions without freedom and protection of his or her rights. In addition, people should be given the freedom to move around freely and create associations.